Hey, welcome back to Duckman Cycles and VW Garage. I'm your host, the Duckman. We're back today with my 1956 Beetle Oval, also known as Eleanore, and today we're going to replace the shift bushing and the shift coupler. And these are rather important maintenance things on your Beetle. And if you have an old Beetle, it's probably a good idea that you check these. Because if your shifter starts to feel a little bit wonky and you're having trouble finding gears, Ruby, probably you're having a situation with one of these. In the case of Ruby, actually the shifter needs to be adjusted on the floor pan left or right. We'll get into that towards the end of this video. But these are parts that are normal wear. And the shifter shaft actually slides back and forth inside of this one. And then the coupler on the back, this attaches to the transmission and it goes in and out and twists and finds the specific gear locations. Anyways, we're going to get into replacing these. You're going to want to stick around. Please like, comment, subscribe. Please pluck that little dingle belly down there next to the subscribe button and we get updates every time I upload a video. Don't forget to check out Duckman Cycles VW Garage up on the Facebook group page. Subscribe to VV the Duck VV where you guys can ask your questions and I'm going to do a Q&A answer to them over there. So if you got any questions, ask them down below in the comments. As always, if you'd like to email me, duckmancycles@duckshit.net, and we'll be back right after the intro. Okay, if it seems like this video was done in a little bit of a hurry, that's because it was. I actually got a service call. It's an emergency, high-profile one, not too far from here. I'm the nearest technician. I have to respond, and I mean, it just came in right after I finished recording the introduction to this video. So we're going to hurry through this as fast as we can. If we do it right, we should be able to have it done in less than an hour, my time. For your time, for you watching the video, it'll probably be about 10 minutes. So thanks for watching, and let me show you the parts that we got today. Okay, amongst the tools and parts that we have here, we of course have our shift coupler. This is all the little pieces that go to it. There's a barrel that goes in there, a bolt. There's the little, what do they call that? Little dick bolt. It's a grub screw. And a washer that goes on there. You're also going to need your shift bushing and the little retainer ring that goes around it also. A 10mm socket would be real nice, as well as a 8mm wrench. Make sure you also have a 10mm wrench in case you need it. You're also going to need 13, 14, and a 12mm socket. I don't have the 12 here currently. Typically these bolts that hold in a shifter are 13mm. On older Beetles, sometimes they're 14s. And if it was owned by a ding-dong, who knows what they put on there. It could have been a 12. So be prepared. Now this is a stock shifter from a Type 3, but this will work in a Type 1 platform just the same. And this is Eleanor's original shifter right here. We're going to want to see what we've got here and see which I'm interested in using. I do have different ideas for a shifter, and because Eleanore is a highly modified Beetle, I actually may modify this shifter to make it more comfortable for me as a bigger driver that sits further to the rear. Now as you notice, shifter's already been removed, as well as, hey, the whole body has been removed. And I gotta admit, this job is a lot easier to do without the body on. And as a result, it really only takes a couple minutes. With the body on, it's gonna take you a whole lot longer because you gotta walk around, put things in, go back out, check the front of the car. If you have two men, or a man and a woman, or two women, not gonna judge, it's a whole lot easier for somebody to work in one end of the car while another one works in the other end of the car to get that shift shaft aligned inside the tunnel. But a few other things that we are going to need. It's a good idea to have a flathead screwdriver in case you need it. There's some grease and a piece of sandpaper. Emery cloth would be better, but right about 100 grit ought to be just fine. Now what we've got here, starting out the job, is this is our front panel. Obviously I haven't restored it yet, but this is the panel that goes up on the front in between the tubes on the axle beam. It goes right in here and covering this hole. You can see one of the bolt holes there and the other one is over here. Those are typically 10mm. Remove that panel. Now once you've got that far, you want to remove your shifter. Typically two 13mm bolts. Earlier Beetles are 14s. If somebody switched some things out, it could be a 12. You want to remove your shift coupler, which will be found all the way back here underneath your back seat. There's typically a cover that covers this with a screw that goes right in here. Usually it's a flat, sometimes it's a Phillips, it depends on who did what. Or maybe your cover is altogether missing, like mine is. When you're inside of there, you want to remove your grub screw, which is this guy. and it'll be sitting inside the shifter coupler cage. In the top there's actually a screw hole on this side of it. Remove that from here, slide that off the shaft, then turn it up on its side, and what you'll find is a bolt inside the coupler rubber like this. Now this is actually urethane one. Some people crab at me for using urethane ones, but I've discovered that they work just fine for me. I maintain them and check them frequently, so I've never had one disintegrate, fall apart, split, or otherwise, and I've been running some of these for many years, and they've been just fine for me. Now there may be different generations of them, maybe some of them sucked, but mine have been good. Nonetheless, always keep yourself a backup in your car. These things are really easy to replace, and if you do have a problem, it's a real pain in the ass when you can't shift your shifter, so make sure you have a backup. Anyways, we get that done. At that point, now you've got everything disassembled, and that shaft is now ready to come out of the car. Now typically you can get started in the back here, grab it, and shove it as hard and fast as you can. Mine just jammed. That was actually a very bad demonstration, but there it goes. Push it as far as you can forwards. Get up here in the middle of the car, and using 2 fingers, just shimmy it to the front. Go as far as it can. You'll hear it. There it goes. Hit the bulkhead. Now up in the front, and this sometimes can be a little bit tricky. Now usually that thing is sitting on the floor inside the frame head. Yeah, I can feel it. There it is. Put your fingers on it and pull it out. Now, once you've got that far with your body on, you're going to notice, boom, it hits the spare tire well. Inside your spare tire well, on all Beetles, Karmann Ghias, probably even things, Type 3 also, there's some type of access panel that comes out from into your spare tire well. Remove the little cover if it's a Type 1 Beetle, there's just a little cover. Type 3, you'll have a big giant cover inside of here. Remove that. On an earlier Beetle, your hood will have a very, very long slope. And one of the reasons for that long slope is because it covers the access hole for the shift rod removal. And later Beetles, the hood only comes to about here. And they shortened the hood because they had to make the bumpers bigger and higher. Although they changed the cosmetics of the car, it was actually for more functionality, probably to conform with U.S. standards for bumper laws. But nonetheless, there'll actually be a cover just like this, but on the front of the body here. So if you ever wondered why there's that circular cover that's below the hood on the later Beetle, that's why. So remove that too. Then you get back under the car, and you pull this shifter out, and then it should pull through the body just like this. There it is. That's our shifter rod. Now you notice mine is kind of rusty. It's not uncommon for them to be rusty. Sometimes they're actually really greasy. Sometimes they're really shiny and in good shape. Mine was rusty because this body has been off of this car for a long amount of time. And you actually did see last October that Eleanore got rained on at the car show. And yeah, it did get watered down inside the tunnel because I didn't have a cover on the e-brake hole or on the shifter coupler hole. I think I had a shifter. Yeah, I did have a shifter on, and that was covered. But nonetheless, some moisture did get in there, and that's why it's rusty at specific parts. You can see some spots are not rusty, and some are, and that's the reason why. So anyways, this is where the sandpaper comes into play. Just take your sandpaper and polish this sucker up. And you don't have to get it completely spotless, although I gotta say that's cleaning it up pretty well. But the idea is to get any of the barbs off of it that are going to cause it to get hung up inside the bushing when you push this through the car. So you want it to be as smooth as you can get it. Now, I'm an expert at this because I've been doing this since I was in middle school. So you'll see that I'll polish this sucker up real quick. As I said, I'm an expert at that. So I polished that sucker up good. Now I didn't get all the rust off of it. You can see there's still some spots, but when I run my hand along it, it's absolutely smooth. And that's really what you want. You don't need to polish this thing down to nothing. And you especially don't need to sand the thing down until it gets a smaller diameter, because then you're gonna have a loose shifter. So you just wanna go ahead and polish it up as best you can. There's actually a little paint on it right there, but that's gonna stay right where it's at because there's no friction gonna be on that area. Okay. Well, what we need to do next is not paint this. Some people say, oh, you know, I painted it up before I put it back in. Don't paint it. Because as soon as you paint it, number one, you're going to have to let it dry a couple days to make sure the paint sticks. And that's going to slow down your progress of getting this thing installed. And if you do put it in after it's painted, as soon as you slide that shift bushing over it and you push it in, it's going to tear all that paint right off of it. And ask me how I know. I've wasted much time doing that, and I'm not going to anymore. OEM part, by the way, Volkswagen. See that Volkswagen Planet? That's right, I'm using OEM part. You gotta love it. Looks like it's been modified though. It's got the slit in it for an earlier Beetle. The later ones didn't have that. And it's not a perfectly straight cut. It's not really gonna matter because that just means it accepts either type of shifter. Anyways, all right, let's go ahead and put this thing in. All right, up inside the area where your shifter goes, this hole right up in here is where this bushing needs to go in. And the bushing goes in just like that. It has to go in before the shift rod. Do not think you can shortcut this just because it's a split bushing and spread it open and snap it over that shifter shaft while it's still inside the tunnel and press it into place. It will not fit, it will not work. I don't care what you try, I don't care what you do. You're not gonna be able to do it without cutting a notch out of this thing, and then you're gonna have a loose shifter shaft. So don't do that. Now inside the tunnel, it looks just like this. This is where the shifter mounts on top of, and actually I'm holding it backwards. It goes in just like this, and this bushing is going to press into this hole inside the tunnel and go in just like that. But before we do any of that, we need to put a little ring around this bushing. And this is important because this is actually what's going to keep it tight. There we go. And then inside the tunnel, imagine if you're a little man and you're standing inside the tunnel and you're looking up at this thing, you would see the shifter would come through this hole. This goes in here just like that. Then your shifter shaft is going to be pressed right into this hole. Just like that. 2 fingers if you can do it. She likes that. And once that's in, you're good to go. Then we work on the shifter shaft. So let's go ahead and snap this sucker in. Now if for some reason it's really loose, then you definitely have to use 2 fingers. But if it's really loose bushing and you push it in and it's sloppy in the hole, and mine actually snapped in real nice. But if it's really loose, you will have to fix it by replacing this part. So you cut out a hole in the tunnel around that shifter area, and then you weld this one into place. This is the replacement that goes in there. I figured I'd use it just as a demonstration so you guys could see what it looks like on the inside, but yep, that's actually what it is. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, I was hoping that the camera could not only see in this hole, but also see in the shifter hole way up in the here. Normally when you have the body on the car, you wouldn't be able to see any of this. You'll have to run right back through the body of the car, the same way this thing came out, right up through here. And then you need a second man inside, or yourself, to go ahead and grab, you might be able to see it coming up in the hole there. Way up in there, you see it coming up. From here, because I can see, I can actually throw a hole in one, and I can push it right through the bushing. But in this case, I'm going to demonstrate what it takes to do it when you're by yourself. So let's go ahead and go back up front here. Okay, what I like to do is get some baling wire, or mechanics wire, which is how I was raised to know it as, and create a loop, kind of like that, and stick it down inside the hole here. And what you're going to do is you're going to get that shaft to pass into that loop that we just made. Okay, now we're ready to go ahead and put this shaft in. Now it's going to need to be greased. Remember I said don't paint it, but you're going to want to cover the entire shaft with a layer of grease, except for the tip. And you'll see in a little bit as to why that is. Really, it's kind of in best interest of just keeping the thing neat. This is actually some moly grease here. And I would normally have gloves on for this because it's kind of messy, but in my case I couldn't find them and I just don't care enough today. So I'm going to smear a little bit of this on the shaft. Once again, I've been an expert at this since middle school. And grease it as you put it in. Don't grease the entire thing and then shove it in there, because what you're going to wind up doing is getting it all over yourself. Now you could use regular axle grease on this. I do like moly grease because it has the moly compound in it, which is kind of like graphite. So when your grease dries up, there's still that left behind. All right, let's push this thing all the way in. All right, now let's go back to where we were at over the shifter hole after we wipe our hands down. And this is why I always keep a rag around me when I'm working, because if you get any grease on you, you can take it right back off. And at the end of the day, even though I found myself at tech session, for example, doing more work than anybody else, I'll still have the cleanest hands. Wipe that stuff off as soon as you get it on you. All right, put the lid back on the grease container. Let's go ahead and have a look. Now you remember we put this loop in here, and this is so we could pull that shifter rod back up into position. Now there it is. I actually lifted it up without a problem. So now, with one of your friends up front, and you lifting in here, you can push it into the coupler if it wants to go in. I got it aligned. There it goes. Pull this wire out. We don't need it in there anymore. With our handy rag, wipe that wire down because we're going to use a piece of this again later. And push that shifter shaft into place. Boy, that bushing fits real good in there. That's a good thing. That means that this piece that's up inside of here was not worn out, because as these get worn and they get enlarged, the bushing will be sloppy, and that shaft is really tight on that. So this is good. Now you could have used some fish tape or a piece of string and pulled it all the way through. I usually grab a broom handle and I get up front and just shove it through to where it needs to go. Two-man operation. Your second guy will be back here as you're pushing that thing in and trying to get the shifter shaft aligned with the tip here on the transmission, on the nose cone. If it falls down below or something falls out of alignment, you might have a little bit of an issue. But the idea is to get it up on top here and it aligned with that. Now I do have, as you noticed in there, some parts that you guys probably don't. I have 2 torsion bar adjusters in there. And if you watched in a previous video, I actually made some adjustments in there to make room for the shift coupler. So you can actually disregard those in your case, but in my case it actually makes a convenient spot to rest the shift shaft on top of, so it doesn't fall down in the tunnel. Alright, as always, the broom handle worked out just well for me. We got that shaft pushed in there, and now I'm able, even though I have these huge hands on me, like the Hulk, to get my hand up inside of here, barely, to grab that shaft and pull it out. I should say pull it in. Alright, let's try that again with a different camera angle. To pull this up and over. Just about got it there. If I can just get a little more leverage on it. Alright. Looks like it's currently in the tunnel upside down, which isn't too hard. This is where your screwdriver comes into play. You can easily turn it over, just like that. Okay, that gets it in place to where it needs to be. Everything looks good, and the end of it is not lubed, as I said. If you do notice this is shiny, the reason why is most of the grease actually got rubbed off of it. So whatever's left is just the residue. The tip of it I didn't grease. Didn't do that on purpose because I was grabbing it to pull it through. Now that it's ready to be greased, now that I no longer have to pull it back, I can actually just put a little bit of grease on there and get this thing put together. But the next thing we need to do back here is put the cage over the shifter shaft. And sometimes you need to take these cages and spread them open a little bit. This one I've already done that with. But you want to make sure that it fits over that shaft. And actually, if everything in here fits nicely, so that way, test fit, everything's going to be just fine. Alright, what I like to do is take this whole shifter shaft and turn it over about another 90 degrees. Whichever way it feels like going in the tunnel. Alright, we're going to knock it over 90 degrees to the right. Take this thing, just like this. Want to get under. Oh, these things can be quite tricky sometimes. I'm thankful the body is off. Being a large person like I am, this can be quite a pain in the ass. Alright. reason why I wanted that shifter shaft tipped over to one side is because you need to put the barrel in. It's going to go in just like that. Before you put it in there, I like to put a little grease on it. Where you do want your parts to have proper range of motion. Alright, now tip it back the other way. And then we're going to take that, technically it's just a lag bolt, and our washer, and thread that right into here. This is where your lost 10mm socket's going to come into play. So make sure you can find that puppy because you're about to use it. That socket doesn't allow the bolt to bottom out. Alright, put the other side back in here. Alright. There we go, much better. Alright. That's it, we're snug. We now have a bushing in place, and this is where the grub screw comes in. You want to make sure that that hole was on top. I've neglected to mention that before, but the hole on top here for the grub screw needs to align with the dimple that's in the transmission shaft. There it is. And then just thread that puppy right in there. Damn mosquitoes are out already. I don't believe it. February. Alright, 8mm square shafted grub screw. Get this snugged up. Alright, we are snugged and in place. And this is where our mechanics wire comes in, or baling wire, or whatever it is that you guys like to call it. And how I like to wrap this is I make a hook and I go up and under the shaft just like that. And I go through the hole in the bolt. And this is important. You do want to put this on because these grub screws can have a tendency to fall out. And when they do, and you're driving down the road, just, you know, hidey ho, minding your own business. And then all of a sudden your grub screw comes out and you can't shift. And you go in the tunnel and you can't find it because it fell in. This wire will do two things. It'll stop the screw from turning, number one. And number two, if it does manage to turn, you will be able to retrieve it if it comes loose. I love these pliers. Down in my video description you'll find a link as to how to get a set of these. And that concludes how to install your shift coupler. Now we're going to go up front and install the shifter. Alright, install that shifter. I hear the creepy ice cream truck around the corner, so you might come down here and make a little noise. Take some grease, smudge it down inside the technically, I guess it's a ball joint. Smear it down inside of there. Take your shifter in question and smear it around the base of that too. Get around in there. You don't need too awfully much, but give it a good coating. Then you're going to take your shifter plate, which is this guy here. And these are critical that you install them the correct way because they can be installed 4 different ways. You want to make sure that the side with the big half moon is to the right and it faces up. Why do I always have the burping sprees when I'm trying to talk here? I burp constantly. It makes it hard to get my words out. Alright. Just like that is how it's going to go. Make sure we don't have anything in our threads here. Now the shifter, and this shifter actually, does have the pin on it. You see the little pin sticking out? That is going to align with that notch that was in the shifter shaft. So we're going to put this guy on. Turn it around so it aligns, and then mash it all together. Alright, now I have some nice bolts that I've got that I'm going to do a little restoration work on instead of these rusty crusty things that I'm putting in right now. But the rusty crusty things are going to get this thing assembled for the time being. Alright, one bolt there. One bolt up front. go here. Just snug it a bit. I generally like my shifter pushed a little bit to the back. Because I'm a tall driver, I tend to sit a little further back than most people. So figure out approximately where you're going to want it. And you may have to make an adjustment on that to get it in the correct location. The hell size bolt is this? This is a 14 also, okay. Alright, snug them up. Now we're going to test the operation of the shifter. And once these are snug, if the shifter feels right, wow, needs a little bit of an adjustment, but actually it's one of the most solid feeling shifters that I've ever had in any Volkswagen ever. Yeah, here it is. First, second, third, fourth, and reverse should be way over there. There it is. I think we're good. The only way to know for sure is to get it on the street. Once I get the feel for it, I'll know if it's right or not. I'll be able to make adjustment if it needs it, but otherwise, yeah, first, second, third, fourth, and there's reverse. Okay. In case you're curious, here's what it looks like from the rear. Currently we're in neutral. First, second, third, fourth, and reverse is way over here. There it is. I think that feels fantastic. Although I'm noticing my transmission looks like it's moving a little bit here. I'm gonna have to check my mount bolts and make sure that they're all tight where they should be. I may not have snugged them up down below in there properly. Otherwise, it looks good. There's reverse. Oh man, one step closer to driving it. Okay, a couple of important things. Remove your broom handle. Take your cover to the frame head and make sure you have a good seal to it. This one doesn't look in too bad a shape here. It needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but this whole thing needs to be restored. Make sure that you fit this together and then you bolt this into its appropriate place, which is right here. Two 10mm bolts go in there and get you squared away. Be sure that you seal that up. If you don't seal that up, moisture will get in there and your tunnel will rust from the inside out. Now inside the tunnel is typically not much for paint, you know. So any moisture that gets inside of there will attack things and you'll have problems. So do make sure that you cover this up. And also, if you live in a cold climate, or even a hot climate for that matter, that will act as an air scoop. And how do I know this? Yeah, ask me how I know. What will happen is the air will get rammed in there as you're moving down the road, and all the cold air is going to come out through your e-brake boot. So you're going to have a cold air blast coming onto your elbow, and it kind of sucks. I'm actually having that problem in the fastback right now, and I don't know why, because everything is sealed up as far as I know, so there's got to be a rust hole somewhere I haven't found. So do put this cover on. And then lastly, once you've got that cover on, you will want to restore the cover that belongs inside of your trunk area, where your spare tire lives. Of course, just a little one on the Type 1s and the Gias, and on the fastback, it'll be a big replaceable cover. If you have a late model Beetle, there's also a circle that goes out here. The Type 3 also has a circle. And if you're in a Carmen Ghia, you'll actually be pulling that shifter shaft out through the horn hole. So there's a big oval hole that's down here, and there's a rubber boot that goes on the inside of it. You want to put that rubber boot back on. Again, that's important, because if you don't, water's going to get in there when you're driving, and your trunk area is going to rot out. Well, I think that should give you an accurate description as to how to replace your shift shaft coupler and your shift shaft bushing. Two very, very important parts that are just absolutely detrimental to the proper operation of your very-cool Volkswagen. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Parts list is going to be available down below in the video description, so please check that out. I'll also post it in the first pinned comment so you guys can see that. For now on, if I don't make my first comment the pinned one, whoever comments first is going to get pinned instead. So how about that? So you guys always want to make sure that you're the first to comment. If I'm first, sorry, mine gets pinned. I think it's a fun little game we're going to play from now forwards. Well, anyway, please give me a licky-likey. Please subscribe. Please pluck that little dingle bell you see down there, subscribe button. That way you get updates every time I upload a new video. Email me, duckmancycles@duckshit.net. And if you'd like to check us out Duckman Cycles and VW Garage up on the Facebook group page. And my Instagram is VV. Please go ahead and join me over there and follow what we do. A lot of skiers, photos, and stuff that I get into, you know, the minor stuff. We'll be over there, and hopefully you'll check me out. I really do appreciate it if you do. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.